Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the Extra Mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now, your host, Jackson Mummy, owner of the Celebration Bar Review.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 301 of the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. This is your host, Jackson Mummy. Glad to have you with us. Hope everyone is safe and healthy and hanging in there. It has been quite a week in the bar exam, and we are coming to you on the weekend rather than our normal midweek episodes because there's just so much going on. We want to get that information out to you. And today's episode is filled with lots of information. We're going to begin, as we have for the last few weeks, with a conversation between our senior editor, Megan Saya, and myself, talking about bar results that came out this week, and then everything that's happening with respect to bar exam jurisdictions and decisions around their exams in July and the fall of 2020 related to COVID-19. Then we're going to include an interview we just recently conducted with a successful UBE student. He has a great story of overcoming real hardship and adversity in order to pass the exam in this last administration in February of 2020. I think you're going to find it an inspiring discussion. So we've got a lot of material to cover today, and I want to get right to it. If this is your first time with us on the podcast, we're glad to have you here. We come to you every week with information about the bar exam, and we provide this material in both a video and an audio format. If you'd like to watch the video, go to celebrationbarreview.com/301. That's the episode number. If you'd like to listen to the podcast, you can do that through Apple Podcasts, through iHeartRadio, radio.com, Spotify, almost any place that podcasts are syndicated. Now, all of that information is there for you, and all of our previous episodes can be found online on our website as well. I also want to let you know that if you are trying to figure out what to do about the fall exams, either because you got your results in the last couple of weeks, or maybe you're expecting results back and think they might not be favorable, if you're in that situation, or you're thinking you might take the exam in 2021, I want to let you know about a new webinar that we've been offering. It's called Now is the Best Time to Take the Bar Exam, Why You Should Ignore the Crowd and the Fear. And this is a really valuable hour of free training. We're going to talk about what's going on with COVID-19 and why we think this is, in fact, the best time to take the bar exam. The best part of the webinar, as far as I'm concerned, is that at the end of the presentation, I do a live 15-minute question and answer, and those have been absolutely amazing opportunities to just hear from folks on the training about what questions they have and what's going on in their particular jurisdiction. Now, we're offering this free training a couple of times a week, and it's simple to register. You just go to the button on the show notes, either in the audio page of today's podcast or in the video. There is a button to click as well. Or if you'd like more information, you can go to celebrationbarreview.com/now and register. And then we'll see you for this free training with a live question and answer. I think it could make a huge difference. If you're at all debating what to do about when to take the next exam, this is information you absolutely don't want to miss. All right, as I said, it was a busy week. We got exam results in a number of states, including New York and Texas. Megan and I break that down for you, talk about the results, talk about where we think the exams are headed, and we look at the impact of COVID-19. So let's jump into that conversation. What a busy day, huh? A lot going on.
Yeah, lots going on. Now we're getting to the intersection of results being released and changes with the July exam within states. So yes, it's like a lot of moving targets right at the moment.
All at the same time, and they're all moving. So take a deep breath, right?
Yeah.
Let's start by talking about results and what we know about results right now. And then we'll switch over to what's happening going forward. As I said, we got results today in New York and Texas. We had results earlier this week in Massachusetts. I believe we had them in Maryland as well. A couple of other states, some UBE states. So significant with New York. We never know when they're going to release. My spidey sense was that it would be today, and I was right. And then my second spidey sense was as soon as New York jumped, Texas would jump, even though that's 2 weeks ahead of when Texas said they were going to release results. We have some statistics from New York. We don't have any statistics from Texas yet. So let's talk about the New York statistics. And I guess the big one, the lead here, is that the overall pass rate in New York is 40% for February of 2020. That hurts, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's rough. We're just starting to see this in a lot of these big states. Florida, New York, obviously California has been rough for a long time. Yeah, with these really low pass rates.
Yeah, this is not good news. I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat this in any way. The lead that you're going to hear in the popular media is that there was a 61% pass rate for first-time takers. That was actually a very small number of people in the exam. There were far fewer first-time takers than repeat takers. The repeat taker pass rate separated out is 28%. That is a low number. Now, it's not as low as Alabama or Florida, which looked to be at about 10 to 15% earlier this month, but it is still a significantly low number. The other low number is foreign trained attorneys. Their pass rate was 31%, and that's first time and repeaters. So if you're a foreign trained attorney, this is a very tough exam with a very low pass rate. I think it's interesting to note that there were 2,250 repeat takers in the exam, and there were first-time takers way less than that. There was a total of, maybe Megan, you can do the math. There were 3,500 candidates, and 2,250 were repeat. So I don't know what the number is, but that is a big disparity between repeat takers and first-time takers. And that's an indicator to me of where the troubles are, I mean, in large part. I also think this is symptomatic of what we've been talking about going forward into the next exam. If there are fewer first-time takers in the field, in the mix, scores are going to change. The scale from the national conference is going to change. And we're going to talk about multi-state scores, right? We have a question about the MBE averages. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But the net effect of this is, I think, a greater opportunity for repeat bar takers coming up into this July-September window that's opening up in different jurisdictions. In New York, that's going to be September 9th and 10th is what we now are being told. I think that's still subject to change. But I think if you're a repeat bar taker and you have a choice, sit for that September date. I think you get those, 600 first-time takers off the field for whatever reason, and if you have the opportunity to take the exam, and not everyone's going to get that opportunity in New York, it looks like. But if you get the opportunity, I would definitely try and get in on this exam and not wait till February of 2021. So that's what we know about New York. Very tough test, very low numbers, and discouraging, I think, for a lot of people. And I'm sorry. Those of you that did pass, congratulations. We're very proud of you. We will wait to hear results as they come in. Texas, as I said, we do not have any overall statistics, so I don't really know. Texas is also a weird state because they're transitioning to the UBE. So, we will have more to say next week, I'm sure, about Texas, because depending on what the numbers look like and what's happening with COVID-19, Texas may be really off the board entirely for repeat bar takers. I mean, we'll just have to see where that goes. So any other thoughts about results?
Yeah, no, we just had a question about the NCBE released sort of the MBE scores, even though all jurisdictions have not released their scores yet and released their results yet. So we had a question about how is it that the NCBE released that there was this drop in MBE scores?
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and address that. So here's what happens. When the bar exam is given nationally, the Scantron sheets are sent in to the NCBE from every state. So regardless of where you took the exam, your Scantron sheet went to the national conference. And they run the entire multi-state scoring, which is why some of your states can tell you how you did compared to every other jurisdiction, even though all those jurisdictions haven't reported yet. The bar examiners in all 50 states or 49 states know what the MBE scores were. And so the bar examiners then release that data at about this point every year. And so here's the data for February 2020. The mean score was 132.6. The mean scaled score, let me say it again, was 132.6. Now, if we go back to 2016, the mean scaled score was 135. So we have dropped 2.5 points in that period of time. And you might say, well, 2.5 points, that's a big deal. That's a significant drop. Now, the significance of this going forward is what we've been talking about with COVID-19. the examiners have to have enough applicants taking the multi-state bar exam to equate the exam. They have to have enough people that they can say, how did you do on those marker questions compared to our samples, our core from the 1970s, and then they equate the exam. They add scaled points. When you have less people, basically you have two sort of divergent things happening. You have a lot of people that score really well, and then you have a lot of people that score pretty badly. If we reduce the number of people that score well, then the examiners, in looking at the whole body of tests, will say this was a harder test, and they will give more scaled points to everyone. So it is to our advantage if we're not a good MBE student. It is to my advantage to have the good ones leave. Don't take the exam. Don't take a spot away from me, but you don't screw up the scale, right? Did you ever have that person? You were that person in law school, weren't you, that screwed up the scale? But for most of us, it was like, oh, get that person out of this class. They will ruin the curve for me, right? And that's essentially what's happening is the curve is adjusted based on how well people are doing. So you've got what we're seeing in the scoring is that it's not level across. It's a group of people scoring really well and a group of people not scoring well at all. And that group of people scoring well is pushing the scale down so that the ultimate scaled score is dropping. I know that seems really geeky, but that's what's going on. So if we get rid of some of those first-time takers from elite law schools, the scaling will go up. And the weird part is you get rid of your good bar takers, the actual mean score will go up. So you heard it here first. I'm predicting that the mean scores will go up if the examiners can give an exam in July or September 9th or September 30th or all three. Now, the key is they've got to have enough jurisdictions participating to be able to equate the scores. And so that's why they can release these scores before you've seen yours. It just means that in your state, if you're in California, for example, they've got your MBE scores. They've had them since about 3.5, 4 weeks after the exam. And that's what drives the way they analyze your written scores in California and everywhere else. So yeah, that's what's going on. And if you're in a jurisdiction that reports out scores as a percentile, that percentile is almost always reported against the national percentile, not your state bar takers. So did I clear that up, or did I just make that really complicated for everybody?
No, that was good. That was good, okay. I think. All right. So now we're going to shift over to coronavirus and sort of broadly what's going on with the states. Where are we?
Yeah. You want to kick us off there?
Yeah, sure. So we're still waiting for California to make their decisions. So for all of my California students, we're still waiting on that. They sent a recommendation letter to the California Supreme Court. They're hoping to actually do it online. We don't think that that's very likely because although the state of California could probably do it because they've been working on developing an online version of the exam for the first year law students. So what they're hoping to do is give the first year law students exam online in June, and then that would be a test run for doing the real thing in July. However, that would require the NCBE to be okay with the MBE being given as an online exam, and we just aren't seeing any signs of that happening. So that would be great if it did. As of right now, that doesn't seem terribly optimistic. I'm not terribly optimistic about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, California would like to sandbox themselves and say, well, we could do an online exam. Well, I'd like to, be confused with George Clooney, but it doesn't happen. So, there you go. What California would like and what the National Conference would like, I think in this case are not compatible. The National Conference is terribly concerned about security. Online exams are very difficult to secure. Remember that when California gives the first year law school exam, that is not having to equate with anybody else. It's not being shared anywhere else, and it's a very small number of people. When you suddenly expand to 8,000 or 9,000 general bar takers just in California and 30 or 40,000 bar takers nationally, it's a whole different ballgame. And so while the California bar thought this was a swell idea, I have gotten no indication from my sources at the National Conference that they think it's a good idea at all. They are years away from an online exam. That's what I've continued to hear. And so I think it's unlikely that would happen. So I think that's one part of this, right?
So interestingly, Massachusetts has
Yeah.
floated the idea also of doing an online exam, but the key with that is that they would take themselves out of the UBE for that jurisdiction, for that administration. So if Massachusetts goes to online, it would only be Massachusetts. So my assumption with that is probably that they would not give then the MBE. That doesn't mean, they could. So that's how they might get around that is, and I don't know then if they're thinking of developing their own multiple choice questions or if they would just get rid of all multiple choice questions. We're just not sure what that looks like. But that's the way that a smaller jurisdiction is trying to maybe get around the having to convince the NCBE to give the MBE online.
Yeah, I think you're right, Megan. And there's another part of this that's really interesting about Massachusetts. Massachusetts is one of those states that recently switched to the UBE in the last couple of years. And in general, the bar examiners of the states that have switched to the UBE weren't very happy. They were sort of like the old guys getting swept out of office. And so this is an opportunity for them to say, well, you know what, we ran our own exam for years. We could run our own essays. We don't need the national conference essays and we don't need their performance tests. We'll just give our own exam. Now, that would be nothing short of chaos in the sense that who knows what they would do or how they would grade it or who would be allowed to take it. It would be apparently only applied to that one administration of the exam, as you said. And it would take them completely out of the portability of the UBE, which is what their court wanted them to do and what they were supposed to be doing. And I think that this tension between bar examiners and their state's highest courts, which we've certainly seen in California, I mean, that letter from the bar examiners to the state court is pretty clear that, hey, here's what we think you should do. Although, wink, wink, we know you can't do most of it, but we're going to put it on your plate now. There is this tension between bar examiners and the state courts that I think is coming to a boil in a couple of jurisdictions. And in Massachusetts, this is sort of the bar exam equivalent of the Tea Party, right? We didn't like going to the UBE in the first place. So now let's use COVID to get out of the UBE and maybe get out of the whole multi-state. Well, part of the problem here is that the multi-state is what gives the bar exam statistical validity. I'm not talking about moral or empirical, but statistically, you have a much higher incidence of dependability or reliability on your score when you use a multiple choice exam, particularly one that says psychometrically tested as this one. You get rid of the MBE, now the exam is a free-for-all. This goes back to the early days before 1970, before the multi-state exam, back when dinosaurs ruled the earth, and every state did their own, in some cases, you literally read the law. You stood up and you were interrogated by examiners. That was the way it was done in some smaller states. So are we going back to the Wild West? I don't think so. I think the trend is towards uniformity and transportability of scores. But here's this opportunity presenting itself, and Massachusetts reached up and said, we're not going to be part of the national approach. Would other states follow them? Maybe. We haven't seen anything yet, but it's still early, and I'm not taking anything away from them. So those two states definitely are worth keeping an eye on to see what they do.
Yeah. And then we got a question, and I think it's bringing it in now because I think we've seen a couple of states do something newish, which is to say we're planning on giving the July exam and a September exam, if possible. So we have, it's kind of every possibility under the sun. There's only a fall exam. There's only a July. Then there's we're going to give the July, but if there's no July, then we'll give the September exam. Then we're starting to see, in addition to the July exam, we're going to give it. So a question that we got, which I think is a great question, is, could I take the UBE 3 times? July 2020, September 9th and 10th, and September 30th, October 1st.
Yeah, maybe. We don't know. As you said, it's unprecedented. We just don't know. I suppose if you were a UBE student, I'm going to put it in that context, you might find a UBE jurisdiction that's giving the exam July 28th, register and take it there, then find a UBE jurisdiction that's giving the test on September 9th and take it there, and then find one that's giving it on September 30th and take it there. Or maybe you take Massachusetts in their strange non-UBE test if they do it. There's all these permutations that are out there. I think it'll only depend on what the examiners say you can or can't do. Now, why would you want to take 3 tests in, 3 months, July, August, September, because you're crazy. In the old days, if you worked for a bar exam company, you did that so that you could steal the questions. Not that we ever did that, but there were companies that did. I suppose that would be a reason to take 3 tests. But I think that the primary reason would be you just want to take your shot, 3 different sets of questions. You would theoretically take the MBE. It would be different each time, but maybe you feel like I would just I'd have 3 chances at it instead of just 1. So I'm buying 3 lottery tickets instead of 1. I would not recommend this strategy. I would not recommend the 2-test strategy necessarily. I don't think it gets you a whole lot. Now, I mean, another approach, I suppose, is you could sit in a jurisdiction like Florida or California, let's say, if it's given in July, although I don't think California will. But let's say you're going to Florida for July, and then you want to do the UBE in September, at the end of September. Well, if that second jurisdiction would allow you, there's no reason you couldn't. It'll be crazy to study for 2 different exams. That's why I would stay in UBE, so at least you're doing the same studying. In any event, nobody's got the answer to this because we've never faced it, and the examiners haven't faced it. And so the most important thing I can tell you is if you are one of those people, and I know there are a few out there that are trying to figure out how they can deal with this situation, look at the administration guidelines in that state, look at the deadlines for registration, the requirements, reach out. It'll be by email. Phone calls won't get you anywhere right now. I don't think there's a bar exam jurisdiction that's taking calls anywhere in the country at these days. But you could send an email and say, here's my plan. I'm going to do this. I would not tell them. In other words, if you're going to do Florida, let's say you're doing UBE jurisdiction 1 in July and UBE jurisdiction 2 at the end of September, you better tell both jurisdictions what you're doing, because it would be a real mess if they found out later and said, hey, what are you up to here? So if we get any decisions or rulings, we'll let you know. Yeah. I think that, a couple of deadlines to look at that are important. May 5th, the national conference will make their announcement. I'm sure what they're doing is trying to figure out if they have enough jurisdictions that want to test in July. Before we went on air, Minnesota just jumped into the mix and said, well, we think we're going to give a July exam or a September exam. Now that's new. Some jurisdictions like Kansas and what was the other one, that Tennessee said we're going to do July and a September test. But then Minnesota said, well, it's July or a September test. I mean, I don't know. How many more variations? Yeah,
we've seen every possible permutation, I think. Right. Although the one that we have not seen yet is we haven't seen any jurisdiction that's doing July and both fall dates. So we have not seen that in one state.
That's true.
But I mean, at this point, I am not making any guarantees that we won't. Who knows?
Yeah, I think anything's possible. Now, I just want to remind all of you that on our website at celebrationbarreview.com, there's a link in the menu that says July 2020 updates. And we are keeping that updated literally to, within a few minutes or an hour or two of these changes. And they are coming literally that rapidly. We've made 3 changes to that page just today alone. So we're staying on top of it as best we can. It is obviously a fast changing scenario. I think next week when we talk, we will be right on the cusp of that decision point from the NCBE, and I'm guessing it will be an even stranger world a week from now than it is today. So stay informed, stay connected, follow the states that you're interested in. There's too many states now. Remember when we started doing this way back when? There's 3-4 states we could talk about. Now we're, I don't know, more than half the states have done something. And the rules around diploma privilege and temporary student waiver, I just want to say those rules are limited in the states that are offering them. They are almost all limited to current 2020 law grads who are first-time takers. If you are a repeat bar taker, or if you graduated law school years ago, this will not apply to you. And by years ago, I mean 2 or 3 years ago or more. So I've gotten questions from people that said, well, I graduated 20 years ago. I never took the bar exam. Will I be qualified for the student waiver? No. No, we love you, but no, you won't. It's a recent spring 2020 first-time taker. And if you took the exam in February 2020 and failed, even if that was your first time, you're not going to qualify for these student deals. So
yeah. And we have a student question, one last one about coronavirus, saying they registered for the July DC bar exam. So has it been postponed indefinitely? If so, do you have intel on when this exam is likely to fall? So yes, DC canceled their July exam, and they have not decided. They said May 4th is when they're going to decide when they're going to, if they're going to do a fall administration and which date. So the two possible dates are September 9th and 10th, or September 30th and October 1st. And again, I know we say this, it's like broken record every week, but I just want to highlight it. That is a Wednesday and a Thursday. It's not the normal Tuesday, Wednesday that we're used to seeing for the bar. So I just say that because I know in my head, I always think Tuesday, bars on Tuesday. These are not starting on Tuesdays. They're starting on Wednesdays. So just keep that in mind. But yes, for everybody, check with your jurisdiction.
Yeah, and I'm going to repeat something else since we're on broken. This is broken record Friday. It doesn't matter where you sit for the UBE. Yes. You can go to New Mexico, go to North Dakota, go to Alaska, take the exam wherever you want to take it, wherever you can take it. The score will still transfer in, even if that jurisdiction isn't giving a test. So DC will still take people into the DC bar if that's what you want. I mean, I don't think a lot of people actually want to be in the DC bar, having been there. But the reality is that it doesn't matter where you sit. So you've got 32 choices or so with the UBE. So don't get locked in and say, I've got to go to DC. If I can't go to DC, I can't take the exam. That is not true. You can go anywhere you want that gives the UBE, take the exam, and apply the score to DC or any place else that you want. So I think this is a real misunderstanding that a lot of people have, that they have to be physically in the state where they want to practice to take the UBE, and that is not true. Now, it is true in Florida, California, Georgia. Yeah, those three for sure, and a couple other states along the way.
Texas, not much longer.
Not much longer, thank God. All right.
Okay.
Listen, well, I hope that gave you a good rundown of what's going on currently. I do want to remind you that you can go to celebrationbarreview.com. There is a link in the top in our menu for July 2020 exam updates. We keep that current so that you can see what's going on state by state. There are links to each state's orders and information, so be sure to check that out. Well, as I said, we conducted an interview recently with a successful UBE student who has an amazing story. We talked to Jeff just after he got his results from the North Dakota UBE exam, and his story is a wonderful one, as you're going to hear. Jeff came to law as a second career, but he also came with some learning disabilities, including a severe case of dyslexia and ADHD. And I think it's amazing what he did to overcome these burdens and how he used our course to help him prepare and to finally be able to pass the exam after multiple attempts. I think you're going to find him to be a really engaging guy who really worked hard for this achievement, and we're so proud of him. So I want to jump into our interview and let you hear from him in his own words what he did to pass the UBE. Everybody, welcome back to Hanging Out with Successful Bar Exam Takers. We've got a really great opportunity today to talk to Jeff Holt. And hi, Jeff. How are you this morning?
I'm good. How are you, Jackson?
Well, I'm good. I was just saying before we went live that you and I had a great interview yesterday, which I forgot to record in its entirety. So you're very gracious to come back here and share your ideas again. The advantage, I suppose, is that I know a little more about the details of your story. So I'm probably going to ask a little different kinds of questions today. But let's start with the good news that you have to share with everybody.
Well, I passed the bar after 6 times. I failed it my first 5 times, but excited to say I passed it last time.
Great. Congratulations. And which bar exam was this?
It was a UBE. I took it up in North Dakota, although I live in Nebraska.
Right. And you had taken the Nebraska exam the first few times when you started out of law school, when it was the UBE also. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And what caused you to decide to switch from the Nebraska UBE over to the North Dakota UBE?
Well, I switched mainly because my wife does census in North Dakota, and we drive up to North Dakota 10 days every month, racking up the hotel points. So I decided to take it up there because I'd be up there during the testing. Nebraska has a 270, North Dakota had a 260 to pass, even though it's the same test. The states get they get to decide their scores. So I thought, hey, if I got a 270, I would just transfer down to Nebraska. So I took it up in North Dakota.
Now, North Dakota is a really small jurisdiction. How many people took the exam with you?
16. 16 is February. It's a little larger in July.
A little bit, but not much.
Not much. I think when I took it twice in North Dakota, I think the first time they might have had 30 people in July.
Yeah, that's typical. And actually, they're putting a cap on their enrollment for this July because of COVID, up to 85 people, because we've been telling people go to North Dakota. We like the North Dakota bar examiners. They get the first results out of the country, and they are pretty easy to work with, didn't you think?
Oh, very wonderful staff. Starting in North Dakota, I decided to apply for accommodations due to my dyslexia. And
I wanted to talk about that. Yeah, I wanted to talk about that because two things that are really unique about your story, I think, Jeff, are that you are a second career lawyer. This was not the first thing that you did in your life. And you had to overcome some pretty significant physical challenges with dyslexia and ADHD. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I always knew I had a learning disability. I did very well in high school, very well in undergrad, summa cum laude and all that. I did very well my second and third year of law school after the initial shock. But I knew I always had to study much, much longer than other people. It would take my average classmate in law school 2 hours to learn. It would take me 12 or 18. I just read extremely slow. Even today, I cannot tell the difference between a lowercase b and a lowercase d. I have to slow it down. I have to slow it way down. I could spell bed 6 different ways in the same sentence. And in North Dakota, when you use your laptop for taking the test, you don't get spell correction.
Right. So one of the things that you did is you applied for these accommodations and they gave you time and a half. Is that correct?
That's right. And I used all of it up, all of it. And it was actually the first time I was able to finish the bar exam, both the essay portion, the multiple choice portion. Before I would leave, I would get to number 85 and time would be up, or I'd be halfway done with my essays and I would have no conclusion.
Yeah, so I think one of the interesting things to me about your story, Jeff, is that you went from handwriting your exams initially to typing them and then to going to accommodations. Was it hard for you to acknowledge that you needed those accommodations, you needed some additional time and assistance to get through the exam?
It was very hard. I'm a proud person. I'm an old generation. I don't like asking for help. I don't like being a burden on society. And I'm just really proud. But, you know, after $100,000 after law school and a little more than that, and I want to practice, I decided I needed to do something. I knew I had to, so I went to the doctor and says, I believe I have a learning disability. Can you test me, diagnose me, and tell me what I have? So I got tested. I have ADHD. I have severe dyslexia. And so I was able to get the accommodations, and it helped. I would finish the multiple choice maybe a couple minutes before time ran out. I would finish the essays. Well, I was writing clear up until the end, until they said pens down. And then, but what I was able to do, I would do my facts, my legal and law, and then I'd do my analysis. But I would do them all three, and then I'd go back and add in. I'd flesh it out. So at least I got done.
Yeah, you were very strategic about this process, and I think one of the interesting things is that you had come close. You were within 5 points of passing on previous attempts, but just couldn't quite get over the hump. And it was that determination to succeed and to do what it took that I think really makes your story stand out so much to me. There's a fine line between being proud and just saying, okay, this is what I got to do to get it done. And you kind of made that decision, I think, at some point that you were just going to do what it takes. And in hearing you tell me your story yesterday, one of the things I reflected on was how hard you worked in law school, how hard you worked to get all the way through this. Can you just share with people what your law school regimen was like? You were talking about the drive you had to make every day, and I think that's pretty instructive about the kind of person you are.
I live in northeast Nebraska, about just over the side of the Missouri River from Sioux City, Iowa. I applied to University of South Dakota. I chose USD because it was an hour away, and Creighton and UNL were 2-hour drive away. Plus USD was actually cheaper. USD is always in US Magazine as best value or top 3 best value law schools. And so I would get up at 4:45 a.m. I've always gotten up early, always, since I was 20 years old, early riser. I'd get up at 4:45, I'd shower, I'd get dressed, I'd leave my house by 5 a.m. I would drive to law school, get there by 6. I would study, class, study, class, study. I'd leave law school about 8, 9 o'clock at night and get home at 9 or 10. It's about an hour drive away.
But even at that, even with all of those things, you still were putting in enormous hours. You were pretty dedicated even in this early part of this process, right?
Well, I don't like to see my money go to waste. A proud guy, I always did well in school. I always asked my kids to do well in school, to get straight A's, and they did, So I would be a hypocrite if I didn't do that same thing. My first 4.0 I got when I went back to school, I would send to my son and have him put my report card on the fridge. I'm really proud that way. I asked my kids to do it, they did it, and I would do it too. So,
so then what was it like when you got your first bar results back and you weren't successful? I mean, as a proud parent, as a proud husband, as somebody who'd worked so hard in law school, it had to be a shock to you when you got the results.
Well, it was. It tears your heart out, and I'm always the mindset, you don't quit. You just don't quit. I would tell my kids not to quit. You give up and you try again. So again, I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't do that. So I tried again. However, after failing 5 times, it tears your heart out even more each time. And I would rather fail by 500 points than 5. And
that is hard. There's no doubt. And, as we get results in from people, we see people missing by 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 points. I feel much worse for those individuals because you're so close. You're just a couple of answers away, basically. And I know that as you and I conversed about those experiences and talked about that as you were going through it, you were really determined. I mean, I'm just going to keep digging in here. And one of the things that you did to study this last time that I thought was really helpful, and you mentioned it, was using mind maps to take notes. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that helped you sort of organize your thoughts and study?
I love mind mapping. I absolutely loved it. Older generations like me, non-traditional students, we're back in our flashcard days. We'd use flashcards. We'd make our own. I took your book and I wrote every single question on an index card, and I would write the answer on the back, and I made my own flashcards. Then, probably about whenever I started with you, I started hearing things about mind mapping, and I go, what's this? And I tried it, and it's basically art that it's note taking, but with your own. It was wonderful. It worked good for my way of thinking.
It's a visual note-taking system, so you're able to see the relationships between different concepts, right? So it's not just all jumbled in your brain, but there's a place where everything goes. Is that a fair way to say it?
Exactly. And what helped is in the creations, I'm not very artistic, I would use you as my victim or as a prosecutor or something, and I would put that connection from A to B to C to D, and I could actually literally see that connection in my mind as opposed to just writing on my index cards.
I think it's... Yeah, go ahead.
I have to say, this last time, I got, after going with CBR, I started passing the multiple choice. And I started passing with a high score on the multiple choice after I got the accommodations, because I would get 15 more. I would finish the test.
Yeah.
And you suggested, that I put almost all of my time, about 95% of my study time, just on the essays. And that's what I did. And that made the difference at the end there. You were able to write. And the writing system that we taught, instead of trying to issue spot and get a lot of words out, you were really focused on the disputes instead, right? So absolutely.
Using the FLA.
That's kind of the beauty of your system, the FLA. If you put your facts down, and I didn't write all the facts because some of them are distractors, but I put all the relevant facts. And then on the law, the mirror image rule comes to mind, or hearsay rule comes to mind, and the exceptions, the exceptions. And then when you argue the disputes, you are actually getting to the issues and the issues just come. You don't have to, okay, what's the issue here? Is the issue Article 2 or is it common law? They automatically come out. That really helped. You got to know the difference because there's different rules. And I knew them backwards and forwards, inside and out.
That's pretty exciting. I want to jump to a moment. For most people, one of the hardest things is that moment when you know results are coming out. You've been through the exam. This is your 6th try. Your family's been behind you and supportive. And now North Dakota is the first state typically, or one of the first states to release results. Can you talk a little bit about what results day was like for you?
Oh, they tell you, and I asked, and I says, expect the results around April 10th. So, okay, it's a torture to wait a month and a half for results after taking the bar, but you do. But on April 2nd, I was checking my email and it says North Dakota Supreme Court bar results are here. And I'm like, wait, this is 8 days sooner. I expected to suffer another week. But so I get on there and all I have to do is put in my name and my bar testing number, and I wait and I wait and I wait. And I didn't want to do it. It every time just tears your heart out. And I felt good about some of the tests in the past I took, and I didn't make it. I would fail by, that much. So after a half hour of building up the courage and just trying to find every ounce of bravery I could, I put in my number and I clicked on it, and it was green this time and it said successful. Okay. And so I passed. It was exciting. I was kind of alone in the house at the time, and I texted everybody. During the application, you have to put referrals, and there's 6 people that I use as referrals. I group texted them. I passed. They all texted me back. I texted my wife. I texted all my kids. There's so many people who helped me. I got on Extra Mile. I passed. I was so excited.
That's a great feeling, isn't it?
Yes.
And does it, people sometimes ask me, is it worth going on when you haven't been successful? And I often say to them that when I talk to people like you, Jeff, who've been through, a long haul to get there, that moment of passing, was it worth it?
Oh, yeah. For me, it was, I actually I'm not a crier. Okay. I don't blubber. I don't cry, but I was actually moved to tears. It was like tears of joy. Finally, what a relief. It's, I could have got cancer and found out I went into remission, and I would be just as excited as probably, I think it's been one of the top type feelings in my whole life. So.
Yeah, and as it should be. I mean, it's really an extraordinary accomplishment. I mean, look, when you're not 24 years old and you've got some accommodation and disability challenges to deal with, and you've got a life and a family to support, that's a lot on your plate. And I think for you to reach this goal, to pass, and of course now you're able to be licensed in 6 states, which is pretty exciting, including, North Dakota, but not limited to North Dakota. So it's got to feel like the opening of a whole new life for you, right?
It's been an adventure, a journey, one that I wouldn't want to repeat, except for all the failures. These are things that give you experience, so I would repeat it. I just wouldn't want to.
Yeah, I got that. I think that's honest.
But
when we talked yesterday, you said that your advice to people who are in your shoes, was to never give up, never quit. I'm wondering if you could just sort of talk about that for a minute, because I know that there are a lot of people watching us today who are repeat bar takers and probably feel like giving up. What would you say to them?
Don't. You've graduated from law school. Why stop there? It's a lazy way out. I remember Amanda and how many times she took the bar, and she was a great help. And I remember James, great help, and Randy from California.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love their stories, and I wanted to feel what they felt. So, I took the caffeinated chewing gum. I did what you decided for me to do. It was you who told me to work on my essays, and it was you. I love your podcast. a week and a half before you come out with your predictions. And you're very clear to say these are just some odds that are going to show up. Okay. But you were spot on. I mean, you said secure transactions. It got a high number in your opinion. So I studied secure transactions. I studied wills and estates and trusts and everything you don't get on the MBE part. And sure enough, they were on there, and I knew it. They were on the bar, and I'm just so thankful that I put that extra time into studying those. And I give you the credit on that. There's so many people, and I'm just so happy I passed.
Well, we're happy for you, and I am so deeply appreciative of you sharing your story. I know it's going to motivate a lot of folks, a lot of people who are feeling kind of down and discouraged. And I know that when they think about the interviews and the people that they're excited about, Jeff is going to be one of the names that they talk about. So I'm excited to see where your career goes from here and what opportunities are there. I think your quality of never giving up is going to make you a terrific member of the bar. And I'm so thrilled for you and excited. I know your family must be just elated that this is over, right?
They are. I look like the troll doll who's been electrocuted with his hair everywhere, but it's over. So bring on new stressors, And the good thing about the UBE, even if you get just above the 260 but not as 270 mark, those 6 states, I think it can also practice in Guam and places like that. And I've lived in Guam for a couple years and the Marshall Islands, and I lived outside the country. But,
yeah, so it's probably more than 6. You're right. I think it is. So
North Dakota and Minnesota, right next to each other. I could practice in Fargo and Moorhead. They're just connected cities separated by a border. A lot of options.
That's great. You deserve all the options and you deserve all the credit. And again, our deep appreciation to you. We're so glad that we could be with you on this journey and that you would share it with other people, and look forward to all of the great things that are going to happen. And so for all of our audience, we want to thank you. And to our audience, thanks for being with us. I hope that this was as inspiring to you as it was for me. And we'll see you again next time. Thanks so much, Jeff.
Thank you, Jackson.
Well, that's our episode for this week. We will keep you updated as more information comes out. We want to congratulate everyone who passed their bar exams this week, and good luck to all of you still waiting on your exams. We're still waiting now primarily for California and Georgia. Those are the 2 big states remaining on the board, and we will get those results early in May. And finally, I want to remind you, we've got our free training webinar coming up. Now is the best time to take the bar exam. Why you should ignore the crowd and the fear. It's absolutely free to attend. All you have to do is register using the button on the show notes or go to celebrationbarreview.com/now, and then we'll see you for that free training and live Q. We've received great feedback from the people that have gone through this training. I hope you'll join us and be one of those participants. Again, it's completely free, and we'd love to see you in the next presentation. All right, everybody, that's it for this week. Please don't drink any bleach. And we will see you again next week along the Extra Mile.
Thanks for listening to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at www.celebrationbarreview.com.